Hey everyone, welcome back to Tina's Narration, the place where we bring you real, true African tales every time. Don't forget to drop a comment, leave a like, and hit subscribe so you never miss a story. The crinkled paper with the DNA test results felt like a stone in Eric's hand. The printed words burned into his eyes as the traveling medical worker's voice echoed heavy in the hot, dusty air of Gutu village. Neither child, not the tiny boy in Tariro's arms, nor the infant girl pressed to Panashe's chest, was biologically his. A hush fell over the small crowd that had lingered nearby. Curious villagers pausing their chatter to stare, their quiet whispers slicing through Eric's pride like a knife. He stood frozen, his face drained of color, his mind reeling. This was the moment his entire selfish, lazy life had crumbled to dust, and he had no one to blame but himself. Long before this devastating day, Eric had been a boy born and raised in this quiet rural village in Zimbabwe's Masvingo province, a place of sun-baked mud brick huts, swaying maize fields, and ancient msasa trees that shaded villagers from the brutal African sun, where Shona traditions wove through every part of daily life. He came from a home unlike most in Gutu. His mother and father loved each other deeply, faithfully, a rarity in a community where polygamy was not just accepted but expected. Men across the village took 2, 3, even 4 wives, not out of love, but to stack their households with workers' wives, who toiled from dawn till dusk, tending fields, fetching river water, grinding maize into mealie meal, cooking sadza, and raising children, while the men lounged under trees, drank traditional beer, and reaped all the rewards. Eric's father was not a rich man. He had no large cattle herd, no thriving trade business, only a small plot of land. He worked tirelessly to feed his family. But he never looked at another woman, never dreamed of taking a second wife, devoting every ounce of his energy to caring for Eric and his mother, their home a haven of quiet love and mutual respect. As a boy, Eric watched the contrast between his family and his neighbors, confused by why his father chose hard work over the easy idle life other men lived. But he never internalized the lesson of honesty and devotion his father tried to teach him. As he grew into a young man, Eric rejected every shred of his father's work ethic. He was lazy, unwilling to till soil, learn a trade, or earn an honest living. Instead, he spent his days wandering the village, scheming for easy ways to take what he wanted. He made a habit of deceiving women, wrapping them in sweet, empty words and false promises of love, dating them only for what they could give him: money, food, shelter, never giving anything in return. He craved the lazy life of the polygamous men he'd envied as a child, a life where others did all the work, while he did nothing but benefit. That was when he met Tariro, a kind, gentle girl from a well-off, respected family in Gutu. Her father was both a successful farmer and a trader, traveling to nearby towns to sell produce and woven baskets, giving his family comfort and security. Tariro was naive to Eric's true nature, swept off her feet by his charming lies and fake declarations of lifelong love, convinced he was a loyal, hard-working man who would care for her. Eric married Tariro not out of love, but for her family's stability, and for a short while, the gifts from their traditional Shona wedding kept their small home afloat, hiding his laziness. But once those gifts ran out, Tariro saw the truth. Eric refused to lift a finger. She worked from dusk till dawn, fetching water, laboring in village fields, sewing and weaving to earn coins, cooking, cleaning, and providing for every one of Eric's needs, even as she fell pregnant with their first child. Her body ached, her spirit wore thin, and she was deeply unhappy, but she had no choice but to keep going, bound by village tradition and her commitment to her marriage. Still, it was never enough for Eric. He grew greedy for more ease, more hands to work for him, and decided he wanted a second wife, just like the men he'd always admired. He started staying out late, growing cold and cruel to Tariro, until one day he walked into their hut with a young woman named Panashe beside him, announcing she would be Tariro's co-wife, and that the two women would live and work together to support him, as Shona custom demanded. Tariro was 8 months pregnant, exhausted and heartbroken, but she could not refuse. Village traditions required co-wives to treat one another with respect, to set aside their pain for the sake of the family. Panashe, too, had been tricked by Eric's lies, trapped in a marriage she'd never imagined would be so empty. The two pregnant women banded together out of necessity, working themselves ragged to feed Eric, keep their home, and prepare for their babies. Eric's parents begged him to stop his selfishness, to work for his own family, but he ignored them, too stubborn and lazy to change. Before long, Panashe also fell pregnant, leaving two heavily pregnant women to carry the entire weight of the household alone. Tariro gave birth first, then Panashe months later, and while they loved their children fiercely, there was no joy in their home, only exhaustion, sadness, and quiet resentment. Then the rumors spread through Gutu like wildfire. A man from a nearby village named David, a hard-working farmer known for his kindness, claimed he was the father of Tariro's son. Panashe's ex-boyfriend, a young man from a neighboring clan, also stepped forward, saying he was the father of her daughter. Eric flew into a rage, his pride blinding him. He convinced himself he was in full control, that his wives would never betray him, that the gossip was nothing but lies meant to humiliate him. He confronted Tariro and Panashe night after night, screaming accusations until the hut felt small and suffocating. But both women denied the claims fiercely, their eyes filled with honest hurt. Tariro insisted David had only helped her carry firewood and fetch water during her hardest days, never crossing any line. Panashe swore her ex had only visited to apologize, not fathered her child. Still, the whispers grew louder, and Eric's shame turned to obsession with proving he was right. Then came news of a traveling DNA paternity test show, visiting rural villages across Masvingo, offering answers to confused families who could no longer ignore the talk. The test cost $400, an enormous sum Eric could never afford on his own. He had never worked a day in his life, but the show's organizers, moved by the urgency in his voice, agreed to test both children for the price of one. He scraped together every coin the two women had earned from selling their woven baskets and garden produce, even borrowing a small sum from his reluctant parents, and took Tariro, Panashe, and their babies to the testing site on the edge of the village. The wait was torture. Eric paced back and forth, ignoring Tariro and Panashe's quiet pleas for patience, convinced the results would silence the rumors forever. When the day the results arrived, the whole village gathered to watch. The medical worker unfolded the papers, cleared her throat, and read aloud. Sample 1. No genetic match between the male subject and the infant male. Sample 2. No genetic match between the male subject and the infant female. Silence crashed over Gutu like a storm. Eric stared at the paper, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold it. The words sinking in. Neither child was his. The crowd murmured, then erupted into quiet, judgmental whispers. Some shook their heads, others looked away, unable to meet his eyes. Tariro and Panashe stood tall, their babies still bundled close, and for the first time, Eric saw the relief in their faces, not just pain. Tariro spoke first, her voice clear and steady, no longer afraid. I told you the truth. David never hurt me, never took more than helping. I stayed with you because I believed in marriage, in hard work for our family. But you gave me nothing but pain. She turned to David, who had stood at the edge of the crowd, watching, and nodded at him. That afternoon, she gathered her baby boy, her few clothes, and walked to David's mud brick home, where he welcomed her with a bowl of warm sadza and a place by his fire. Panashe did the same later that day, gathering her baby girl and following her ex-boyfriend to his home. Her head held high. She had spent enough years serving a man who cared nothing for her, and she was done. Eric was left completely alone, with no one to cook for him, no one to work for him, no one to tend to his every want. The village turned its back on him. No one would sell him food. No one would let him borrow tools, and his parents, heartbroken, could only watch as their son crumbled. He stumbled back to the small plot of land his parents had given him, and slowly, painfully, he began to relearn the lessons his father had taught him as a boy. He woke at dawn to till the soil, plant maize and millet, tend to his crops, and sell his harvest at the village market, doing honest, backbreaking work to feed himself. The laziness that had defined his youth faded away, replaced by discipline and humility, as he realized the true cost of his selfishness and lies. Months passed, and Eric's small maize crop grew tall. He would sit under the msasa tree at sunset, watching Tariro and David laugh as they worked their fields together. Panashe and her ex carrying water to their home, their babies cooing in the shade. He would never win back the family he destroyed, never undo the pain he'd caused. But he spent every day after that working hard, building a life of his own through honest labor. He learned to respect the women he'd once used, to value hard work over empty pride, and to understand that love wasn't about taking it, was about showing up, every day, for the people you cared about. And though he carried the weight of his mistakes always, he hoped, in time, that the village might one day see the man he was trying to become, not the lazy fool he'd been.